There's the music. That means it's time for Animal Talk. Some of the best doggone pet people on the planet helping you with your pets. Today, a very special interview and a very special interviewer. We have a whole big crazy party going on. Chris Lynch, author, Walkin the Dog, is being interviewed by one of my journalism students, Emily. So she's going to take over the reins and she's going to sit down with Chris and dive into his motivation behind writing the book, Walkin the Dog. It's a sweet story. Chris is an interesting guy, and Emily's just an awesome young journalist. So let's dive into it with Emily, Chris Lynch, Walkin the Dog here on Animal Talk.
It's nice to meet you. My name's Emily. So I read your book and I really liked it. I thought it was really good, and I had a few questions. Why did you write Walkin the Dog? Were there any experiences or people that provided inspiration for you?
Wow. Yeah, there are lots of them. But can I start by saying I'm very sympathetic because my bachelor's degree is in journalism, so I'm always happy to help out a journalism class whenever I can. I had this. I've been kicking around for a long time, and the publishing world is pretty tight, and they're very serious these days about writing about something. I always thought, I'll just write. I'll do my thing. I'll voice it through, and eventually it'll find its audience. I'll do the writing. The publishers will do the publishing, and that's not really, even if it ever was true, it's not really true now. You've got to be writing about something. One of my favorite backhanded compliments was from a major guy in the library world, Michael Cart, who was talking to my editor, and he says, this was years ago. He goes, Chris writes so well about stuff nobody cares about. And so ever since then, it was a great line. I had a laugh at it, but it made me think, I've never paid enough attention. I've never paid enough attention to what it's about. What's the book about? It's something that comes to me later. Selkie, come here. Selkie, come here. You want to come here? This is Selkie, by the way.
Oh, I love dogs.
Yeah, I'm kind of fond of them myself. Right. So I had these ideas basically about my issue that I wanted to write about was about a kid who was a bystander. Because I usually don't take like top of the tree issues, capital I issues, to write about them. I'm usually looking at the second tier of issues. And more and more in the past few years, I've been reading about all the main issues that we're all very aware of, the cultural problems that we have getting along together. And it seemed to me more and more sneaking in under each of these stories was the notion of bystanders not being very helpful. And bystanders, if you're not a help, you're part of the problem. And so I knew I had this kid because I totally understood this. The early title of the book was The Inactivist. I've pretty much lived as an inactivist, not somebody who doesn't care, but I don't tend to join. And so I thought, I can write a story about this. This is apparently an important thing right now. And then I realized, if I tried to put together a book about a kid who basically said, no, you're all right. I'll stay home. I don't want to do much of anything. It would be a pretty short book. But then usually when you put two ideas together that you've had for years, perhaps, you'll come up with the right one. And for years, I've been thinking about it after listening to millions of news stories. Dog walkers make the world go round. Everything. It's like the dead body was found by the dog walkers. The drug deal was broken up by the dog walkers. The burned out car was found by dog walkers. The altercation was broken up when the dog walkers walked by. And I thought, this is a way to get this guy out of the house. If we give him a little dog walking business, he has to meet the world and the world has to meet him. And then there's the whole thing, which comes up later in the book, that all dogs are essentially guide dogs. So they guided him through life and into life, and they made a story out of it.
Yeah, I really liked your message and everything. So I had another question about how Lewis, he went through a lot of changes throughout the story, and what was the experience for you to create a character like him?
As I said, I'm pretty intimately familiar with the early version of him, the inactivist, because it's sort of how I've been. But I also, one of the things that happened as it was a lovely accident, the title of the book morphed over the course of the book. When it starts, his refrain, walking the dog, I was just walking the dog, mister. I was just walking the dog. I didn't see anything, was his way of, it's a euphemism for being a bystander. And then by the end, as his sister points out to him, I blame the dogs. Something happened to you. And I blame the dogs. The dogs, brought him out into the world and made him interact with the world. And so later, walking the dog stands for an entirely different thing, almost an opposite thing. Oh, next. Another dog just walked into the room. So that I understood, and it's sort of like, I'm an older gent now, so it's not for me to be, I don't think, out on picket lines and demonstrations, but I am very kind of politically and culturally aware and involved. I'm actually much further to the left than I was when I was a young firebrand. But so that I understand that trajectory, it's sort of a pilgrim's progress from not being involved to being a citizen, to being somebody who's involved with life as it comes to him. And I would say that's pretty much my journey personally.
Walking the Dog has a very meaningful book, and I'm sure you wanted like a lot of people to connect to it. And I know you kind of shared this already, but like what's like the main thing you wanted people to take away? Like what is your main message?
Yeah. It's a quote I borrowed from a women's shelter in Boston, Rosie's Place. Later on, the journey must be made in the company of others. He thought, if I'm not the problem, it doesn't matter if I'm not involved, as long as I'm not the problem. And the sort of, I hope, subtle message is that if you're not involved, you might be part of the problem. And the world wants something from you. The universe wants something from you. And you should probably try and come up with that something.
What was your favorite part of your book and why? Like, what did you have the most fun writing, or what did you enjoy writing the most?
Oh, man, it's certainly got to be dog stuff. Well, I love writing dialogue. I think you can see from the book, I could spend my days just writing dialogue. I do the other stuff because it needs to be done, because you got to fill in the gaps. But when I look back at my actual real life, I see moments. I see the set pieces. I see, the events. I don't see the transitions. I don't see the connecting tissue. So that takes craft to weave that back in. But usually if it seems like the character is having fun in dialogue, then I am too. That's what I enjoy writing. But aside from that, obviously, I think it's pretty obvious I'm enjoying writing the dogs. Like when they're not dying.
Yeah. There were some parts of your book that were like emotionally hard for like Lewis and like all of his family. What was the hardest part of your book to write?
When Amos died.
Yeah, that was a
sad. Yeah, that was kind of hard.
Yeah.
But I thought it had to happen. It's sort of like, it's like he says to the other character side, he says, he goes, dogs die, He said, well, they shouldn't. It's like, that's a growth moment. Well, that kid, they have to.
What characters did you connect to most when you were writing?
Well, as I said, the journey was pretty much, Lewis's journey is kind of parallel to mine. But I think the characters after Lewis, who I had to really get behind, I think the characters who felt rightest to me were the female characters, Agatha and Faye. there's this, every time I dropped into their voices, I felt so right. I shared a sensibility and a sense of humor with both of them, even more so than with my ostensible main character.
That's interesting. Is Walking the Dog, like, I'm sure I kind of got this already, but is it a special book to you? Like, out of all of your other books, is this like have a special place in your heart? Like,
Yeah. I've been, my first book came out in 1993. And so for a long time, I published steadily. And then I actually signed the contract for this book in 2015. And a whole lot of things happened on my side, health issues and personal family stuff, and just the car accidents and the what all of life, as it does, came to me. And also on the publishing side, I had a longtime editor, and then he got unwell, and then he died, and then I was sort of orphaned editorially for about a year. So there was a lot of drift to this book. So when I got back together after that year with my new editor, Kendra Levin, and we worked really hard at hammering out a productive relationship, it made everything take on more meaning. So it's sort of like I'm back from the wilderness, and also I'm feeling more connected to the publishing people I'm working with. So yeah, in that way, this book has a lot going for it, in that I'm personally connected to it in the way I haven't been in a lot of years.
It's really nice to hear, like, about your connections and everything. I saw that you have quite a few books about, and some of them were about war. Do you have like any reason behind that? Was it an interesting topic to you, or do you have any experience in your life that inspired your experience with like family members or people you know?
Well, I'll tell you what. I wrote a few war book series for middle graders. And the first one, it's sort of like one led to another. The first series, it was an unusual circumstance in that the idea was brought to me by the publishers. They wanted a Vietnam War 4-book series with 4 different main characters from the 4 different services. And I had to come up with a connecting tissue between them. And I had them all go to the same school before, and then, but here's my real personal connection. When I wasn't not quite old enough to have been eligible to go to the Vietnam War, but I had older brothers who were just about on the cusp. And as is famous to students of journalism, that was the war that really came into people's living rooms. It was relentless, and it was nightmarish, and it was day after day after day. And I got kind of neurotic about it, thinking, this is going on forever. Not only are my brothers going to go, but it's still going to be going when I come around. And I didn't have literal nightmares like I gave to one of the characters, but I had real panic about the whole notion of it. And it just seemed like to me the worst possible scenario playing over and over and over again. And so I built this series on one character having those feelings, and having those feelings about his 3 friends. And they had a pact that nobody was going to go unless one of them got drafted. Then, well, we're all going to go. And then one of them got drafted, and then, so they all went.
Walking the Dog seemed a little different from some of your books, like the ones about war. What kind of books do you like to write the most? Did you like writing Walking the Dog kind of books, like more realistic fiction, or kind of, I guess that was kind of realistic fiction back then, like during the war and everything? What did you like?
I would say most of my books, almost all of my books are realistic. Basically, the basic category is realism. But a little bit now and then I'll dabble in something that could be mistaken for magical realism, just a little bit. But without question, I don't aspire to write books that I don't aspire to read. So I want to write books that can make people laugh. But they cannot be just laughter books, because for my money, those don't work. I used to write a lighter and a darker book, a lighter and a darker book, and now they're always in the same book. And that, to me, it puts it in high relief, the tragedy and the drama and the comedy. And that's what I think I write all the time now. The hard stuff, smack up against the funny stuff. I like comedy. I have a pathological need to laugh personally. It's like the most important thing in the world to me. So that's what I aim for. And, there have been a few books, especially further back, 15, 20 years ago, when I was writing about something. I wrote one series on the kind of famous racism of Boston's neighborhoods. And by the time I was finished with that series, I felt so awful. I could not wait to flee from my own books. It was just full, because I feel like if you write about something ugly, it's got to be ugly. And ladies and gentlemen, this was ugly. And I was really, really happy to be done with it.
Yeah.
And I've had a similar experience with other books, but then there are like humor books where I really like the main character and I like the voice. I'm like, yeah, I could hang around here for a little while longer.
So out of all of your books, what one was your favorite? Like the specific book was your favorite to write?
Yeah. Well, you could probably anticipate my answer. You're not supposed to have a favorite. Like children, you're not supposed to have a favorite. And so I will stick to that line, but also a very common answer is the most recent one or the next one. But I will say right now, Walking the Dog is in a special place because, as the lovely Kendra said, we are relaunching you after a pause. And I'm enjoying the process of being relaunched on an unsuspecting world.
What do you find difficult about writing, and how do you overcome those kind of challenges?
Yeah, I would say funny enough, the question I've been asked in one form or another over the years, more than any other, about this peculiar gig is, text is fine. It's like, how do you keep doing it? How do you go down there? I say down there because my first personal office was this like cave in my basement in Boston. How do you go down there day after day and just do it over and over and over again without a boss, without an office full of other people doing it? And it's best that I don't think about that. It's because, generally speaking, broadly speaking, the it of it, the day in and day out, the part I don't like, I'll tell you, I don't like writers moaning about writing. It's very poor form because it's a great, great gig. And, people would kill to be able to do it every day and not have to do anything else. But the part that is hard is, I'll be sitting there at the desk, and I know it's the same for most writers, and just constantly asking yourself, instead of, you can't cruise through any part of the day if you're writing like first draft. You can't cruise. You have to be in there and asking yourself, more or less, okay, so what do I think? And what do I think now? And what do I think now? And what do I think about that? And what do I think about what I think about that? And that gets relentless. It's sort of like you can't escape yourself. And if you stop asking yourself those questions, then you stop writing. Mm-hmm. And that's too terrifying to contemplate because I can't do anything else.
I saw that you were a graduate of Emerson College. Did they have a good writing program that got you started there?
Yeah, they did. And it's funny, that was my master's degree. I had the great experience, which all writers should have, of in between my bachelor's degree and my master's degree, I took 7 years off and I painted houses and I drove trucks and I moved furniture and I was a proofreader of financial reports on the second shift which was really hard. And I got married and I had my first child. And that was what taught me discipline, the discipline a writer needs more than anything else. So after that long gap of finding out what I don't want to do, and then I went back to the writing program at Emerson. I remember I was, a little bit older than a lot of these people, and I had an infant at home. Sophia was on my back when I would go to office hours. I would have her in the backpack. And by the way, Sophia has 5 children of her own now. But I was very aware of the passage of time and not wasting it. And when I went there were a lot of special people. It was like, I can't write when it's raining. I can't write when it's sunny. I can't write when the guy across the street has his window shade halfway down instead of all the way up. I can't write. And I'm like, you can write when the baby says you can write. That's what taught me the discipline. It's not, contrary to myth, it's not an inspiration field as much as it is a discipline field. You have to be there doing your writing in order for special things to happen. Waiting for it doesn't work. Waiting for inspiration is for chumps, and inspiration itself doesn't like chumps. So it won't come to you.
You teach in the writing program at Lesley University, right?
Yes.
Have you found that teaching has helped you become a better writer?
Very, 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 very much so. Everything I know about point of view, I've learned from my students. I didn't know what I was talking about before I started the teaching. I go, oh, that's what that means. But mostly, and as I say to the students, the workshop method is great because you will learn as much from workshopping somebody else's work as you will from getting your own work gone over by your peers. And I know I've gotten a lot better at that job, at both jobs, because I'm doing the teaching job.
That's good. What does a day in your life look like as an author and a teacher? Is it kind of hard to balance that life? Do you have like a lot of time to write your book still, or is a lot of it focused on your like teaching job?
Yeah. I'm pretty fortunate. I have a fairly quiet situation here. When my kids were still home, my workday was strictly their school day, which was quite helpful. I knew exactly when I was going to be doing what. Since those years, it's been a readjustment. I mean, that was a long time ago now, but it was a readjustment because I had to find the structure and the discipline all by myself, which, I should have known better by then. But, eventually I got around to it. And now I have a pretty quiet life during the daytime. My wife goes out. She's a teacher. So I have a similar schedule there. And I got the dogs here. And having the dogs is great for needing to get out. You have to stop every once in a while. And they let me know when it is time for that. And I have to get out. And that's when a lot of good stuff happens. The teaching it's a low residency program. So we get together for a residency twice a year, January and June, July, where we get together for 8 days and we do all these seminars and workshops and all that. And then we go back to our respective homes and I'll work with students who are my students, 1 or 2 or 3. And I'll get a package of work from them once a month. And then I will work it up, and then I send them a very detailed response, and that gives their marching orders for the next month. So with a minimum of planning, you can fit those two things in together pretty neatly.
How many books did it take for you before you came like really well established? Because I know you have like a lot of books and you have won a lot of awards. So like, how long did it take, or how many books?
I would say, there was one of the high points when, in the early days when everything was new and everything was exciting. There was one New Year's Day, I think it was 1995 maybe, where Washington Post Book World on a Sunday on January 1st pulled my first 3 books together to write a group review of basically my books, my progress. I was like, all right, this is it. This is me here. I'm here. I'm in now. I sort of spent the next several years de-establishing myself, just writing what I wanted to, and not focusing enough on, getting to the point. I just thought it would all work out. I just thought everything, like Lewis early on, he's pathologically optimistic, right? I said, everything will take care of itself. I'm just going to write what I feel like in the manner I feel like, and to their credit, the publishers allowed me to do that. But it meant that eventually, like in this phase, I'm having to reestablish myself and what I do and what is the point and what does the world want from me. It is something I have to ask myself all the time, because if I don't, I will not come up with that thing.
What did you do as a kid or as a teen that helped you to become an author today? Because I've been interested in like writing, and so I'm just curious, like, what did you think helped you as like a teen or a young kid?
The closest I could come to an answer is biding my time. I'll tell you this: I wasn't a reader. I never you know what I do for a living, right? Mm-hmm. And I never voluntarily read a work of fiction until I was at university. So that's a slow start. But I'll tell you what, it contributed to my being able to write well for other reluctant readers. It's shaped my philosophy that I never want to write a book that I wouldn't aspire to read. So I try not to get too wordy. I try to make sure things are lean and pacey. I try to avoid self-indulgence, because once I did pick up a book, I was not a very patient and tolerant reader, so that's probably suiting me well.
What do you enjoy about being an author? What are some things that you like the most, and what are some things you dislike?
I like the solitude of it. It is a collaborative effort because there are a lot of people along the line who work on a book, but most of my part of the job is done with just me and the dogs here. And temperamentally, that suits me. A lot of people are very different about that. A lot of people can write in coffee shops and stuff. I could never. And so it just, in a funny way, while I wasn't a reader, and I would have been the last person you would expect to become a writer in my youth, I think somehow I found exactly where I needed to be.
What are some goals that you set for yourself for writing while you're writing?
You mean incrementally, like every day, every week, every year?
Yeah, and when you're writing a book, first, how every day, when you're writing, when you go to start writing each day, and then when you're writing a book, what's a goal that you set for yourself?
Okay. I don't really deal in numbers, like a certain number of words a day or pages. I can tell you that there is a physical dimension to it in that, which I never as a younger person would have thought. It can't, I'll find myself getting tired, like, Jesus, it's that whole, what do I think now? What do I think now? What do I think now thing is kind of exhausting. And you don't realize that since you're not doing something particularly physical, that it still can be taking it out of you, and it does. So I realized I cannot produce the volume I did in prior decades. I know that. But the key skill in human beings, of all the skills, even invisibility, the superpower is adaptability. Circumstances will always change forever in your life. And if you can change with them, you'll be all right. You'll be all right in any circumstance. And that's what I do. I write a lot less volume, but I also write a lot less wastefully. So I throw away a lot less than I used to. But I think I'm sort of already thinking lean when I'm writing my first draft, so I don't put a lot of fat on there. Whereas before I'd be like, this sounds good. I'm just going to keep writing. Everybody's going to love this. And eventually some editor will take care of it. Well, no, they're not going to want to take care of it if I don't take care of business in first draft.
You live between Scotland and Boston, right? And how has that experience been for you? Has it been easy or hard, especially with like your writing and your job?
Well, it's been mixed, but I know I'm in the right place. See, all of my people are still in Massachusetts. I mean, I'm like, really nobody left the state, and I left the country. And I was in my 30s when I left, but now I'm here, and I've been here for 20 some years. I'm here. My wife is here. My kids are here. Their kids are here. I like the pace. I like so much about Scotland, and I like the feeling that I have both places. And I go back frequently enough to still feel that way, in Boston. I tell you what I have enjoyed, which I hadn't figured out in advance. I like the fact that most of my work life is in a separate place from where I live and work. That it's nice and quiet here, and I'm 5 hours ahead of Boston. And mostly I set my own pace and my own agenda every day, and I think that's been very good for me. I wouldn't be good. You may have found out I'm really not on social media at all. That wouldn't be good for me. It's not good for me to be looking over my shoulder. It's not good for me to be looking what anybody else is doing. It's good for me to just pay attention to what I need to do. And that's in regular physical real life as well as like social media life.
I've seen that you've earned a lot of awards for your book. I know you talked about that, like how you went or you got that review done on you, and then you kind of like established a little bit. But what's like an award that you're super proud of earning?
I haven't earned all that many, but I got one Prince Honor book, and I was a finalist for the National Book Award in 2005. And it's a really fancy thing when you go, and it depends on the year you're at. But the year I was there, I lucked out so much. Norman Mailer was there. Lawrence Ferlinghetti was there. E.L. Doctorow was there. Joan Didion was there. It was like, I was awestruck, which you're not supposed to be, but that was the highlight of the night for me. So, those things are good. They probably mean less to me now than when I was younger. I'll tell you what, not that we cling to every slice that we've ever heard, but I do recall, what matters to me, what makes me feel really good. I don't really need applause. I know a lot of writers who they get, they spend so much of their time at their desk not getting any blowback, that they love to be out in public and singing to the crowd. And it's nice, it's okay, it feels good, but I really don't. That's not one of my preferred modes. What really lights my fire is when a good review comes in. When my editor will send me a review, I like to hear. I like to know that I have the approval of my peers, my writer friends who I respect, and generally speaking, from reviewers. That means that it probably means more to me than it should. I should say, no, it's not. I'm beyond all that. But I'll tell you, probably the worst line I ever heard was way back towards the beginning, and this one review said, Lynch's characters are also venal and self-interested. And I was like, ouch, ooh, ow. And, this is like 20 years ago, and I'm still talking about it. But by the same token, several years later, quite a few years later, somebody wrote about, I think the book was Angry Young Man. And basically it's about, I come from very working class roots, and I write about working class people and stuff. And I think it shows, and I hope it shows. And just this one line that this guy wrote in one review, it said, Lynch honors the dignity of modest aspirations. And I was like, oh. if I never get another review again, that I will I will surf on that one forever. That made me so happy. And obviously, again, I'm still carrying it around, but that's it's kind of like maybe it's superficial, but that's almost what I work for. And letters too. Sometimes my guy, I joke. My readers are not big letter writers, so I don't get a lot of letters. But occasionally something will happen. Like I got a letter from a kid's father saying, my kid is not a letter writer, but I needed to tell you how much the book meant to him. And I was like, yeah, see that kind of stuff. Those are the perks of this job that I don't think really quite exist in the same way anywhere else.
That's pretty much all the questions I have for you, but is there anything else that you'd like to share before we go?
No, that was a pretty good set of questions.
Thank you.
I cannot improve on that.
All right, Chris, thanks for, she did nice. She did a good job, right?
No, it was a pleasure.
I enjoyed listening. And Chris, what was the first pet you ever had?
A portly German Shepherd named Sheba.
Ah, all right. And I've seen a couple guys running around there. Who are your?
Oh, this is Silky.
Hey, there you go. It's zonked out.
Oh, Silky, this is your moment, hon. I see she's a lurcher, so she spends all of her time either running or sleeping.
That's it. Oh, it was great.
I also have Dexter.
Oh, and Dexter.
Dexter's more camera shy. They're both rescue dogs. He's 13. She's 3. He's a mix of Staffy and Australian Shepherd and a bunch of mystery meat.
Yeah. Awesome, Chris. Again, thanks so much for joining us and answering the questions. We really appreciate it. Appreciate the book and everything you do.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, be well.
All right, cheers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Emily, thanks for a great job with the interview. Chris, thanks for taking the time to sit down with my young journalist, share your story and the story Walkin the Dog. Great stuff. Find it at all the online sellers. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, do all those podcast things in all the podcast places. Till next time.
Bye-bye, boys.
Have fun storming the castle.
Think it'll work?
It would take a miracle. Bye-bye.
Thanks for being with us for another episode of Animal Talk. Make sure you do all those podcast things in the podcast places, like, subscribe, leave a comment. We hope you had a little fun along the way. Make sure you head on over to wearingfunny.com. You can grab yourself some gear to show off what a proud pet parent you are. Are you a cool cat mom? Are you a happy doggy daddy? We got all the gear just for you. Hats, shirts, all kinds of swag. Wearingfunny.com. Go check it out and show yourself a little animal pride with Animal Talk. Once again, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Thank you so much for being here. Have an exotic week and kiss your wild thing for us.